Many times people talk about culture, but they're not able to articulate it. And this gives us an avenue to be able to measure it, work with it, but also take all of our employees through a way to bring their teams together on our values and our culture and work through some of the facilitation we've done to look at the behaviors and bring our teams together. I used to raise my hand for any topic. The harder, the better. The more, risk, the better. Because I thought that's going to be the challenge I need to be able to be a global executive. Because that's always something I really thought would be the best job ever. And because of that, I had a really good network, but I never really leveraged my network that way. But that's what helped me get into different opportunities.
Today's episode of the HR L&D Podcast is sponsored by Deal. Now, take a moment, if you would, to consider the following pre-show scenario. Imagine you had to visit 16 houses just to cook your dinner. One place has the pots, another has the pans, another has the stove, and another has the food. You get the idea. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, the reality is most global businesses operate exactly the same way, using 16 different tools and platforms to hire, manage, and pay their workforce. But now there's one platform that does it all, and that's today's sponsor. That's Deal. That's DEEL. And Deal is the all-in-one platform built for global work. So whether you're an enterprise business, a small company, or something in between, from automated onboarding to performance assessments and beyond, you can manage the entire worker lifecycle all under one roof. Hire and onboard talent in over 150 countries, or run payroll in over 100 countries. Even offer competitive benefits, equity, and equipment. With Deal's industry-leading suite of HR tools, payroll solutions, and compliance services, you can scale globally with unmatched speed and expertise. So are you ready to transform your global HR system? If you are, click in the link in the show notes to book a demo with Deal today. That's DEEL. So, Bridgette, I'm interested. How do you view the role of organizational culture in relation to driving success and achieving business objectives at UiPath?
So culture really was a big element of my decision to come to UiPath. Our founder, Daniel Dinez, is very strong on culture. You can watch his videos and he really talks about what culture meant for him as he's building the company and how it's grown. And we, as I mentioned before, we're going from a startup to a scale up and really making sure that our fundamental aspects of who we are culturally are important. We were founded in Romania. As I mentioned, we were born global and we are evolving, and we knew we had to look at how do we manage culture, even if it's one of those more intangible pieces that it has to be viewed. So we've got a culture team, a small but mighty one, as I always say, are always those good teams that connect. And what we do is, because it's a small, not a large organization, we have culture champions around the world that are, our voices to us to make sure we hear what's happening on the ground around the world, what the needs are, what's working well that we can replicate, or where we need to target and address things. But also too, they give us input around our programs, what's happening in the organization, and we leverage them to really make sure that we can scale and ensure our people are receiving everything they have from the benefits of the company. And if there's anything that can be raised or we address, it's a great way for us to connect with the organization. And we're having a celebration in Bucharest in about 2 weeks with our new group of culture champions to kick it off as well, which will be a way to celebrate their connection and give back to the organization, but also to our people around the world. And one of the things we wanted to make sure of that we're evolving our culture, and it was one of our strategy pillars, is making sure that as we grow, as we expand, that we are keeping true to who we are. We took a look at our values. We said, okay, are we still humble? Are we still fast, immersed, and bold? Those still made sense. And we kept those as our values. But the definitions of behaviors needed to change because we're hiring people from all different industries, size, scale, and there's a lot of change for people in the organization. Because of our continued expansion and growth, to look at what the behaviors are and are not. And that really helps us define what does decision making look like? What does the culture of the organization, the heartbeat look like? But also articulate the behavior versus an individual, right? And that's helped us kind of bringing people closer together, but also helps us really challenge ourselves and look at culture and measure culture, because many times people talk about culture, but they're not able to articulate it. And this gives us an avenue to be able to measure it, work with it, but also take all of our employees through a way to bring their teams together on our values and our culture, and work through some of the facilitation we've done to look at the behaviors and bring our teams together in a way to be part of shaping it for the future versus just letting something happen to you as the changes happen.
Sure. There's something I like about that. You mentioned coaching a couple of times in your responses as well, in the way that you do things, but obviously having a look at your values and behaviors, that's a reflective exercise. And you're having reflecting on them to realize, actually, do we still live by these? Do they still work? Because I think we have changed. We talked about technology rapidly changing. People change as well. The culture of work changes so quickly. And I don't think personally enough businesses reflect enough on their values and behaviors to know if they're living with them and if they're still in accordance with with their belief system and what they've actually set out. So it's really encouraging to hear that you've taken that approach, but not only taken it, you've actually taken action on the back of it to go, actually, we need to change these. We need to evolve them to take it forward and move it to the next level. And I know that's something you're passionate about, evolving workplace dynamics anyway. I know you do a lot of work to encourage more women to pursue careers in technology, which I think is fantastic. Tell me a little bit about some of the work you've done on that side.
Sure. So that's always been a pretty big passion. I'll be honest, starting out, I didn't ever think about as a woman that it would be an issue ever in my life, especially working, because I just wasn't raised that way. And it was surprising to me as I grew in my career to see how some of the things weren't maybe either, whether it's equitable or not as considered, I would say. One of the things that I realized one time was I learned a statement called deselect. And I was the head of HR of North America. This is a long time ago, many years ago. And one of the things was I really brought transparency. There was concern that women weren't paid the same or equally. And I pretty much opened it up and showed compensation. And we had a big group of women, brought them together. And then I opened up all the jobs. So all top 10 jobs every week so that people knew what the top 10 jobs were in the company. And I'd always say, if you don't play, you can't win was the headline. And so to get people to be out there to apply for jobs, help with their career, drive that. And one of the things that I learned was the behavior of deselection and just taking yourself out. You read a job description, it says for some travel, it says this, and, there's differences. And they say, women will say, I have to have them all checked before I would even apply. And one of the things I said to everybody, I can show you all the information. We can build all the development. But if you have to look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, why didn't you raise your hand, apply, get yourself into the game, because you're not going to win every time. But if you don't play, you can't win. And so that is one of the things that helped really drive people to take much more action and lean in more from a female perspective, but also help educate and bring men and women together to help support each other. Because I think you have to do it together, both. True. So we built a program at SAP years ago called LEAP, Leadership Excellence Acceleration Program. We took about 50 women across the tougher areas for women because of high travel. And it was all the sales services when you're on location, in terms of implementing the technology and marketing. And out of the 50 women, and we did it in all different levels because we kind of really understood where were people progressing. So we did a lot of, I love analytics, and my background is mostly in the comp area. So really understanding these behavioral elements with the data. And we were able to build a program with one person working on it and no funding. And we just leveraged the biggest projects in the company from a executive perspective, got visibility on the 50 women and helped drive an overall program with them. And it was the flagship program for SAP. And we had 38% promotions with that first group. And I'll tell you, we had 3 slides at a kickoff meeting, and we said, we're building it while we're flying it, right? Well, let's learn from this. And then that became the global. And I think when I left, I think there were about 25% promotions by geography. So taking those types of things, being pragmatic, but really addressing what accelerates any talent and what's holding them back. And how do you remove those things? And some of the same, they were same for men and women. And so we built out other programs based on what we learned and addressed that. And the visibility was a big one. Knowing your own brand, what are you good at? And making sure you know what you want. And I think those are some of the things that we focused on that were sometimes holding people back. And since then, I went to Google. I know this is a long one, but going to Google, we came in and we had high growth at Google Cloud. And there was a lot of people that were hired the first year in, and we hadn't made any of our aspirational goals at that point on diversity, which is one of the times that you can make the biggest change when you have a lot of the ability to hire, right? What we put in place were some real basics right away. I needed to understand why. We just spent 2 weeks to build a diverse candidate slate, 2 weeks. And then you start the interview process, not interview the people that you want to hire. And then you wait till the end until you get people, build out the slate. So 2 weeks. And then we started sourcing differently. And we started actually aligning some objectives for the leaders in the organization. And in that next first year, we had already achieved about 94% of our aspirational goals. Wow. And so it takes small things to make huge impact. And sometimes it's just explaining why it's important and how to do it. Because if everyone knew how to do it, we wouldn't be having the problem we have today. And then again, here at UiPath, I like to do things sometimes a little more stealth-like. And of course, we have a talent intelligent team. We map the market. We have great networks for men and women around the world. And then we've been able to actually increase all of our global female hiring and our overall representation. Still have a ways to go. And also from a U.S. perspective, from an overall demographic perspective, we've increased as well. And we're blowing it out on the hiring so we can attract. And I'm focusing on, attraction or hiring, development, but also retention, because that's really important. And what we did was really put some investment in what you would normally call an employee resource group. We call them PUCs, People Unity Councils. And that's really brought people together. And now it's driving more power, more stealth-like in the organization. And we've had some pretty big success. I don't know if I can tell stats, but a big shift, especially at the more senior levels in the organization. So one, that's visible. Two, that continues to hire more diversity across the organization. So again, many times it's simple things that can make huge impact. And I like to do it more in a stealth way. And so it's happening during normal everyday work versus it feels heavy, people feel forced, or it doesn't match the culture of the organization.
Look, well, hats off to you. All I can say is absolutely fantastic. All three examples. I mean, look, these things don't happen by chance. And I know you used the word pragmatic in your response. I would swap that for proactive. Being incredibly proactive. And what I love is it's not just saying we're going to do something. For each example you gave a solid, measurable outcome and actually able to demonstrate the impact. So, I think anyone listening to this should learn that, yes, sometimes the small changes can have huge impact, and the marginal gains philosophy, like don't give up on it. If you can take a 1% improvement across every aspect of your talent acquisition strategy, right, you'll end up with a much better talent acquisition strategy at the end of it. And I think you mentioned some key words that speaking my language, which was, a lot of HR professionals now are saying, and they've been surveyed multiple times, that one of the biggest challenges is the war for talent. It's become a cliche as it's used so much, but you didn't link it to just the idea of attracting talent. And I think that's where we sometimes go wrong in the HR space, is we're so focused on creating our EVP and saying we have all these values and doing all the things, but we don't do the bit behind it. Measure the onboarding process, making sure people feel engaged when they're into the business, and then really measure the retention of those employees. Have they got a career path? Do they feel empowered? Particularly if you're a female in a tech, tech world, particularly male-orientated tech world, right? Are we giving you the progression opportunities you need and the investment and the support and the networks, the things you can have to thrive? So I think, fantastic response. Really glad I asked the question, and thank you for taking us through the whole journey that I think is important if you want to get this bit right. It's the language I talk every single day, and I hope they can take it from you and take it forward. It does lead me to ask you an extra question though, which is this: How has it been for you in your journey? Because you're operating right at the top end of the HR space now. You're CHRO, you are female in a male-orientated tech industry. I know that's challenging. I've listened to podcasts such as Tales from Under the Glass Ceiling, which is done by Christina Shiflett, which is a podcast all about her journey in the tech world. And that's brought it to life for me of just how challenging it can be. So how's your experience been today? And yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more about your own experience of operating at the top and how hard that's been for you to get there, or easy if it's taken that proactive approach. But yeah, just it'd be great to get some insight. Hello, HR and people leaders. Are you exhausted of the war for talent cliche? The problem is when we hear a cliche, it usually exists for a reason. However, we think it's time for a fresh approach to the talent crisis. That's because at JGA Recruitment, we understand the real challenges you face in sourcing phenomenal HR and people candidates. And guess what? We think we have the solution. Our team is on a mission to revolutionize your hiring process. That's because we're not just recruiters. We're strategic partners dedicated to finding HR and people professionals who align perfectly with your company's vision and goals. So let's break the cycle of frustration together. Partner your talent acquisition strategies with JGA Recruitment and experience the difference in service, excellence, and results. No longer do you need to suffer the costs associated with a poor hire, because with over 100 five-star Google reviews and already trusted by many of the world's leading brands, why don't you take action today? Contact us at jgarecruitment.com to discover how we can help transform your HR and people teams. And here's a bonus. When you visit us, you can sign up for our weekly HR newsletter that's packed with invaluable industry insights and more. Let's revolutionize your HR talent acquisition strategies together and make the war for talent a cry from the past. Visit jjrecruitment.com to find out more.
Yeah. So, I think a couple of things. I remember when I was living in Germany for SAP, working at the headquarters, which was a fantastic experience. You really understand, again, culture, but differences, how things work. And if you go to your headquarters, and just having the experience as a family living in another country has really been a great, probably one of the best things we've ever done in our lives. But I remember coming back from, and this is a kind of these points in time that make you think about what are you doing and how did you get there? And the questions that people ask you, I didn't know the answers, to be quite honest. And so one of the things when I came back from Germany to North America, but to be the head of HR for just about a time, 13,000, 15,000 employees in North America. And that's the US hub. And when I came back, I was prepped for an all hands as the new leader. And I had been out of the United States for almost 4 years. So it's quite a time. And there were still people I knew, which was good, and some sponsors out there. But the question that I got asked on stage, I had prepped about what are we going to do for the people and what's the strategy behind it and all those things. But I wasn't prepared for some of the questions. And the one question was, isn't it harder to be a woman than a man as an executive? And I remember standing on stage and look behind me like, are they talking to me? So that it wasn't the first thing I would always identify with as being a woman. My biggest hang up always was I was so much younger than my colleagues or people I worked for. And I was always trying to catch up with experience and trying to make sure that was the thing that was pretty obvious. Now, clearly that's not an issue anymore, but, I remember standing there on stage thinking to myself, I wasn't prepared for those questions. And, what I said was, I think it's a choice. I think it's hard for both men and women. And, it's a choice for me. I don't see it as a sacrifice or it'd be harder. It's something that, I'm choosing to be part of. But then I did say, I don't know. I've never been a man. I can't speak to say if it's easier or harder for me versus a man, because I just wasn't prepared for it. But it's true. I didn't know. And knowing many men and women at executive ranks and hiring many men and women at executive ranks and knowing their stories, it is a challenge. regardless. And it's something that they either are wired to do, want to do, and put that as part of their life experience. But I think I learned from that. And the other question I got that I was not prepared for, I remember going to Asia and saying, how could you be in this job at your age? Right. There's another question. I'm like, wow, I'm getting really banged up here. And the reality was I really hadn't thought about how I got where I got. And I had to really think through it. And the number one thing was sponsorship. I had great sponsors throughout my entire career, many times men and women. And it was because of either I raised my hand for jobs or I was tapped for jobs. And many people, as you know, when these things happen, you call people that know you. You call people that have worked with you. And I used to raise my hand for any topic. The harder, the better. The more, risk, the better. For me, because I thought that's going to be the challenge I need to be able to be a global executive, because that's always something I really thought would be the best job ever. And because of that, I had a really good network, but I never really leveraged my network that way. But that's what helped me get into different opportunities. And because I raised my hand, I delivered, and I had sponsors in different functions across the organization or even outside as I was looking at different opportunities across my career. So the sponsorship, I didn't ask someone to be a sponsor. It was because of the work. It was because of the visibility, and because I took more risky opportunities because I thought that would stretch me the most. And I do like a really good challenge. And just even on those other topics, I've tried a lot of different things and a lot of it didn't work, right? So you have to keep learning from those mistakes and keep going. So I would say the toughest leaders to work with for me has always been my favorite, because you learn the most, you stretch the most, and every leadership team is different. And I do love being on a team. I always say I'm not one of the HR people that I don't knit my own sweaters that nobody needs, nobody wants, and nobody asks for. I really love to solve the key business and people solutions with a team, a leadership team, and also our people team. So for me, that's where I thrive. And so far in tech, it's got the right pace. You're on the cutting edge of topics. And I always think we can really elevate the HR space by really putting much more investment in the technology. And for me, that's a big purpose and goal for my life as well. So I hope I've answered that okay.
Yeah.
But those are some of the key moments in life that I had to really think about. How did I get here, and who helped me?
Your passion for challenge definitely comes through, but not just the challenge, the actual solving that challenge, which is actually a whole different set of skills, to be fair. You can love a challenge, but you've got to see it through. So that definitely comes through.
Yeah.
I love the idea that you weren't afraid to highlight the fact that you haven't always achieved it. You've had some failures as well. And there's a great acronym, which is FAIL is the first attempt at learning, because you said to us in that response that you've always learned from those failures. And I think that's really, really important, because sometimes we let that damage our morale or our confidence or our motivation sometimes. But if we treat every learning experience as something, or failure as a learning experience, we can really progress. And there's loads of famous quotes about that. And I always like the Michael Jordan one of, he missed more baskets than anyone, but he attempted more. And that's how he scored so many. And I think that's a nice way of looking at it. But I think also you talked about sponsorship. And I'm a huge passionate as a qualified coach myself, for the idea of mentorship or coaching to really elevate things. But from your perspective, of course, we go back to the first question I asked on the show, which is, what does the word human resources mean to you? Actually, what you did in that moment is you reached out to the human resources in your network and you utilized them to help you get forward. And I think we don't do that enough. I know I'm in recruitment, we have to do that as part of my job description, right? But I think we can utilize those resources much more, because typically most people are keen to help. Most people like to give to others. There's a lot of fulfillment in giving to others, but often we're afraid to ask. And what I thought right at the start of your response, I think you said you were in Asia, and they said, how did you get this at your age? When I think of that question, and I think of the people I've coached and worked with, particularly at the senior end, there's a lot of imposter syndrome. And sometimes it's an overused term. But you wonder then, you're not surprised to hear there's a lot of imposter syndrome if people are asking those kinds of questions of you. Because, unfortunately, that kind of question forces us to reflect again, well, do I deserve to be? And actually, who is it for anyone else to question you are where you are, because anyone that's listening to this podcast knows you love a challenge, you fulfill it, and you go for it, right? And I think that's a bit of a shame that that kind of question still exists out there, whether it's based on gender, based on age, based on anything, because we are where we are because we've worked really, really hard, or that's how we should be looking at things. And we should take people at their, from my perspective anyway, that,
Yeah.
at where they are. I'd love to ask though, because you have made it to the top, and we've got people listening to this that I know would love to get to CHRO in their careers. They're driven. They love a challenge. What advice would you give to those people listening to this who are perhaps a little bit earlier in their HR career journey and they want to take some advice from an expert?
Yeah, I think even to tie this into the last question, people say things sometimes that are not the best, right? And I always try to look at, people get nervous. I don't even know how to answer some of those questions. Sometimes I think I use humor a lot I'm good with quick responses. I remember many times I say things like, I know there's a compliment in there somewhere, right? Because they would say to me, gosh, I thought you would be older in this job. I'm like, I know there's a compliment in there somewhere. Thank you for the compliment. Great. Right. Or, so, and I've said things that, stupid things before as well, are just not the right thing. And, I think you just have to always say, I don't take things personally. And back to that imposter syndrome, I heard that a lot at Google. And I remember hearing that in orientation. I thought, how sad is that these are the most talented people, super experienced and educated. And you think you have an imposter syndrome. I think, how can we just ever move away from that and not let those comments that probably aren't perfect to kind of chip away at your self-esteem or who you are. And for me, that would always fuel me to be like, I think I can show you that this is going to work. So those comments, instead of kind of chipping away at my self-confidence, it sort of gave me more fuel to just keep going and say, yeah, I can do this and so can other people. And that's when back to that, I learned on why sponsorship was important. But after that one presentation, I mentioned that story about how is it like to be a woman? I remember thinking like, what? I'm a woman? Mm-hmm. So, and thinking, why are we talking about that? But after that, there were some young women that came to me and they said, if you can do it, so can I. And that's when I learned it's important for me to give. And what I have, one, I need to know my story. How did I get here? But more importantly, how do I lift others and bring them along? Because that is my responsibility. And that's why I think you can see you've got to pay it forward to your point of seeing that other people develop and working with them and pushing them to really, really find their ability. Because one of my gifts, I think, is I see the potential in people. Now, it might be because I can be tough on things or really high energy, lots of outcome, but I really believe people can get there. And if I see it in people, I think you have to bring it out. And so that's one of the ways that I do a better job as I've gotten older. But really, that's the thing I always see in people, that their potential's there. Let's use it and leverage it.
Well, that's a wonderful thing to have if you're working in HR or talent acquisition, or if you're working your role, right? It's maximizing the performance of your people essentially is what we want to do in the world of HR and talent acquisition. So I think that absolutely makes sense. Something that sprung to mind when you said we need to pay it forward. I'll try and say it really quickly for the listeners, and not to take them off segue off them too far. But there's a great Chinese proverb that says, if you want to be happy for an hour, sleep. If you want to be happy for a day, fish. If you want to be happy for a year, inherit $1 million. If you want to be happy for a lifetime, give to others. And I think, we can learn from that, because that's where we get real fulfillment from. And I think that's something that's evident in the work that you've done and hopefully what you're giving to all our listeners today, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So I want to link it back to the world of, the fast-changing world of automation, the fast-changing world of AI, particularly last 12 months has just been crazy. We know that knowledge is power. We know that foresight can give you a bit of an edge. So, tell us a little bit about what we can expect in the world of HR, some of the work perhaps UiPath are doing that can really revolutionize the future of work for those listening to the show.
Yeah, just in case that people don't know, from an AI and automation perspective, we've got the platform for that, and we can leverage any of your technology that's out there. So you don't need another solution. I think, especially from an HCM perspective, we know what's out there. I'd like to see much more advancement in the HR tech space. I do love the work and what it can do, and how we really align with people on driving the technology. And the digital transformation era has been, I think, probably the best way to accelerate focus and being for people first organizations. And some of the things we're doing at UiPath, especially in our people organization or with our customers, is really around looking at our most complex business tasks. And what we're looking at, even on onboarding, we've seen sometimes being able to deliver it 10 times faster. Just think about what that does for profitability, people feeling they fit in faster, being able to get your things ready. I mean, it's remarkable. But we also see that 40% more HR employee capacity by eliminating mundane tasks. There's something like a 39 billion addressable market in the HR space for automation and AI, and just about 60% we've defined that of the processes and the work could be automated, and especially if you combine with AI, can be leveraged with more predictive and futuristic, so that you're not reactive, you're proactive, you're against, and you're very targeted when you have solutions. And so my goal is always to give better input so that our leaders and executives can make the best decisions for our people and the business. And that's what we've been able to do. I can give you one example for a customer. It's Flutter in the UK, and it's, probably know it's a popular betting and gaming brand. We
work with here, so I know them very well, actually.
Yes. So this is a story that they've saved $4 million and avoided $12 million in cost increases and improved their net promoter score, just like, our satisfaction from 10 to 40 with AI and automation with us, and these journeys that they've been able to work with across customers, and at the end of the contact, ensuring the operations and added commercial value. So it's really, I think any idea is the limit here. And I think that it's important for HR departments. What we're seeing is a little bit of resistance. My advice would be is start working with automation HR right now, because you'll start to learn from it, grow with it, and get your teams certified. Our team, 40% of our people team are citizen developers, and we produced 75 automations just this past year alone. And we did some hackathons with our team in HR, and most of them came from our own team, not from developers. So I think it really gives much more freedom and autonomy and empowerment for our HR team. But also, if you're improving how we deliver in the HR space, we are increasing productivity, employee engagement, and empowerment across the entire enterprise, as well as with their customers. And I always think this is going to be a differentiator from talent perspective, because wouldn't you want to go to a place that cares about not having you do mundane work, that cares about giving you the ability to learn a whole new skill and then drive your own outcomes based on the technology we have? So that's some of the things I think that HR groups need to start and start now, because it's going to be important that boards care about it, the employees care about it, and we can't fall behind from an HR perspective in an organization.
Yeah, no, for sure. And as you say, right, there is resistance to change, but it's coming, and it's coming very fast. So, you're only holding yourself back by resisting it, really. You're better embracing it and seeing how you can best leverage it so as not to get left behind. That's a really good example. So we're going to open the vault in just a moment. But before we wrap up and do that, I just wonder if there's anything else you'd like to share with our listeners, any questions I haven't asked that you think, actually, I would love to share this with your HR audience before we open the vault. Anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think I answered one of your questions now that I'm thinking about it. So the advice for people who want to be in the CHRO position, I think, was one of the questions. I'm sorry. Yeah. But I think the advice would be know why you want it for any job. I think that's really important. And make sure you love the CEO and the leadership team. You want to work with great people. I think that's always really important, especially as you grow in your career. And then the other piece is build a people first approach in an organization. That will make and break the differences even of the overall success of the company. And I will tell you, you're more attractive if you've taken a job outside of HR, which I don't 100% understand, but I tell you that many times I didn't get jobs because I hadn't, while I was in big organizations and number twos in the company, I had never owned the space. So getting your first CHRO job sometimes can be tricky because they said you haven't been there, done that. Taking some stints outside and being the COO of success factors and owning, parts of the sales organization and the strategy really helped me think differently but also somehow you're more attractive when you step out of the space, which, that's something to think about as you look at your career and how you drive that as well. But just keep trying, right? And making sure you really love the product, the people, and it's a place that you can be part of the future, and keep going after those CHRO jobs. There's a lot of them out there, and the roles are always evolving. That would be my advice.
Fantastic. I know you've been an inspiration for many listening on this show, and certainly I'll add one more point to that. And of course, it does kind of link to me in a different way, but I'd say something you've done very successfully is you've leveraged your human connections, both for sponsorship and for support. And I think that's another way as well. Whoever you've got in your network, whether it's a specialist agency or consultant like myself that can help you with various career-based journey, things that might support you in what you want to achieve. But actually, there'll be lots of other people in your network as well, from CEOs to HR professionals who may know someone, maybe to give you some guidance, may already be one rung further ahead in their career ladder. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask, because as we've discussed in the show, a lot of people want to pay it forward, and a lot of people are there, particularly in the HR community, who want to help. I don't think we do that quite enough. So absolutely fantastic. Well, look, we're going to open the HR L&D vault.
Opening the L&D vault.
So Bridgette, the first question is this. If you could give one piece of advice to the world, what would it be?
Help each other.
Lovely. Fantastic. If you had the opportunity, what advice would you give a younger you just starting out in this new world of work?
Always stay hungry and always trust in yourself.
Yeah, fantastic. And last but by no means least, what is the guiding principle behavior you've seen in every great leader that you've worked with?
Great listening skills.
Fantastic. Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the HR L&D podcast today. Thank you ever so much, Bridgette McInnis-Day, for joining me. Of course, for those that want to find out more about the organisation that Bridgette's part of, it's UiPath.com. There will be a link in the show notes. And as Bridgette said, it can link with all the different HCMs to help you automate your businesses and your functions and your processes way more efficiently. She gave a great case study example of the work they've done with Flutter, but I'm sure there are many, many others. And also the site gives lots of other resources, and there's a fantastic ebook you can download on the site as well that can get you started on your journey. So do check that out. That's uipath.com. Just want to say as well to all of our listeners, if you are struggling with a payroll, an HR, a reward, a compensation related vacancy in the UK, Europe, or the USA, please do get in touch with myself or my team. You can contact us at jgarecruitment.com in the UK or jjrecruitmentinc.com in the US. Just leave me say one more huge thank you to Bridgette McInnis-Day for joining me today on the HR L&D podcast. I'm your host, Nick Day. I look forward to being in the next show real soon. Bridgette, thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for having me.
Today's episode of the HR L&D podcast is sponsored by Deal, the all-in-one global people platform that simplifies how you manage the entire global team lifecycle. From contractors, direct employees, EOR, and more, you can manage them all in one place with Deal. Hire and onboard talent in over 150 countries in minutes, or run payroll in over 100 countries with just one click. Offer competitive benefits, equipment, and equity from a single dashboard. Even customize career roadmaps, performance assessments, and more for your team through Deal's suite of AI-powered learning and development tools. So no matter your global business goals, Deal's team of over 200 legal experts keeps you compliant with local laws every step of the way. So whether you're an enterprise business, a small company, or something in between, Deal is built to meet your unique global HR needs. Ready to transform your global HR? Click the link in the show notes to book a demo with Deal today. That's DEEL.